morning and welcome to a very special edition of the Brighton Jazz School podcast. This week we're featuring vibraphone player Joe Locke. So thanks very much for joining us, and just to give you a heads up, the boffins over at Brighton Jazz School are in the throes of designing a brand new shiny website for the Brighton Jazz School podcast. I just felt that since we're growing at quite an alarming rate, that it really deserved a website of its own. It's still very much linked to Brighton Jazz School, don't get me wrong, we're not sort of separating them or anything like that, but we need more space basically on the actual site, so it's actually easier to build a completely new site than it is to keep adding pages onto an already fairly complex site. So we're going to be designing that, and it's going to have a lot of extra features for you, the listeners. We're going to have a dedicated gigs page on there, which will be advertising local gigs to the area, and by the area I mean Brighton, London, the South East. We're starting to get some sponsorship from different venues across the UK, mostly in the South East, and we'll be featuring their gigs so that you can plan and formulate an idea about which gigs you might want to go to from week to week. In addition to that, you'll be able to check out previous podcasts very, very easily. The whole entire back catalogue on there. There'll be a dedicated forum, and generally it will seem like a more spacey place, a nicer place to kind of visit and check out what we're up to, and for you to have some input into what we're doing as well. That's really, really important. I really want to maintain a direct link to you guys, the listeners, so that you can help me make this a better experience for you. So there we go. So I'll keep you updated on all of that stuff, but in the meantime, grab yourself a drink, sit back, relax, and enjoy episode 16. Album of the Week is sponsored by Personal Financial Designs, financial advisors based in Worthing. Check out the podcast page on our website for a link to get more information. You were just listening to a composition entitled The Lost Lenore by the Locke Group, and this is from their new album Signing. So here we go. This album is absolutely amazing. It's very, very eclectic. It goes without saying that the level of playing, the musicianship is second to none. Obviously, these four guys are the best in the world. But what's fascinating about this album is the material and the arrangements. The band comprises of Joe Locke on vibes, Jeffrey Keyser on pianos, synthesizers, Mike Pope on bass, and Tarion Gully on drums. The material comprises of 4 tunes by Joe Locke, 2 tunes by Jeffrey Keyser, 1 tune by John Coltrane, and an interesting choice by Imogen Heap. It's actually a wonderful song called Hide and Seek. Really fascinating. We're going to check that out a bit later on. So the material is fantastic, as I said, and I've listened to this album about 15 times, and I know it's good because it took me about 15 times to realise that a lot of the songs on here are highly, highly complex. I think what that means is that the music doesn't sound complicated. You know, the melodies kind of suck you in. It's only when you try and actually work this stuff out, you try and transcribe it or play it, that you realise, oh, it's in 13/8. And for me, that's a really good sign. It's a sign that the music is good music. You know, I think many musicians, well, I speak on behalf of myself, as a trained musician, it's hard to resist the temptation to overanalyze things and over listen to things, to be honest, and forget that actually we're supposed to enjoy music and we're supposed to just get involved in the emotional content of the music. And quite often I find myself, if I really love the music, thinking, what is that? I want to figure it out. I want to, jump straight to the piano before I've heard the rest of the track. So I've learnt to kind of calm my inner musician down and just enjoy the music, because that's why I love it in the first place. It was kind of easy with this album because the music is just great. It's feel-good music. The melodies are catchy. And as I said, it took about 15 listens for me to actually realise that it's complex. There's a whole host of albums out there that you can listen to that are all about being clever, purposely having things in 7 just for the sake of it being in 7. But this music is way beyond that. It's purely about communicating something profound rather than displaying, a technical mastery of music, and I really, really like that. It's really refreshing at this moment in time. Okay, so I'm going to play you a track from the album. I'm going to play you the title track, which is the opening track, called Signing. Have a listen to this. There we go. So you can hear Terry On's drumming there as a clear nod to drum and bass. The left-hand piano and some of those riff-based ideas are very much suggestive of kind of the sort of rock, metal, even dare I say. But the point is, there's so many different influences just in this one song. It's really quite remarkable, and it just shows, I guess, the level of musicians that we're dealing with here on this album. That they're all quote jazz musicians, unquote, but I think what makes a great jazz musician is their eclectic tastes. All the great masters of jazz have listened to a whole host of other types of music, not just jazz. Dizzy Gillespie listened to Cuban music, Coltrane listened to the music of India, and many different types of music. Bill Evans listened to lots of classical music. Miles listened to virtually everything. All of these musicians are able to draw upon their influences and let it all come out naturally in their playing, and that's exactly the feeling I get from these four guys, especially Joe Locke and Keezer, because they wrote the majority of the tunes. But yeah, hats off to them. And let's continue on. I'm going to play you this wonderful composition by Imogen Heap. And in the original, they do lots of sort of layering of voices and like choirs and things. It's really, really quite stunning. I think this is one of the tracks that proves that not all contemporary pop music is rubbish. A lot of what we hear on the radio isn't that great, it has to be said. But saying that, at the same time, there's some really great pop music out there. A lot of jazz musicians are starting to use the pop arena as vehicles for their improvising. I'm going to stop talking, and I just want you to listen to this. This is Imogen Heap's Hide and Seek, played by the Joe Locke and the Jeffrey Keezer group. There we go. What a beautiful song. And well, if you listen to the original, listen to the lyrics, it's quite a sad song, to be honest. I think it's about losing someone close to you, and I read somewhere that Imogen sort of related it to when George Bush was told about the September 11th attacks. And she felt that his behaviour was very emotionless and selfish, and reminding her of the person inspiring the song that she wrote this for. So I don't know, there's seems to be a very deep meaning to the song. And even though the guys on this album don't sing the lyrics, I think they managed to really capture the essence of the song. Very melancholy, but very beautiful and very, very emotive. And it really does communicate something, obviously it means different things to different people, but very magical song, and a great version of it. So we wanted to end Album of the Week this week with a great version of the John Coltrane song Naima. It's a really beautiful rendition. It's a beautiful song anyway, but I love what they do with it here. So check that out. Stay with us until the end, because I'm going to play a whole track from this album and you are going to love it. And, join us next week for another edition of Album of the Week. We'll be checking out another Joe Locke album, so don't miss it. And in the meantime, go and get this album. Go to joelocke.com, and it's Locke with an E, so JoeLocke.com. Get the album, and also there's a fantastic video right on the homepage there of the making of signing, which is just fantastic. So I can't say enough about this album. It's great playing, it's got everything you want. Great melody, superb high intensity jazz playing, tunes that you recognize, interesting arrangements of composition, all sorts of stuff. It's all in there. It's a fantastic album, and even Joe and Jeffrey say that this is the best album that they've made so far. So that's enough reason to go out and spend whatever it is, less than a couple of pints of beer. It seems completely logical to me that you'll go now and buy this album immediately. You'll have it forever. It will enrich your life. What's not to like about it? It will be yours to keep and listen to more than 15 times. As soon as I finish this podcast, I'm going to start the 16th listening of it, and I'm sure I'll discover new things all the time. But there you go. So head on over to joelocke.com. I think it's on iTunes, and you can get it directly from Joe Locke's website there. Go and have a look, because it's a great website anyway. Lots of interesting things there, and you'll check out some other CDs that he's done previously. So there you go. Thank you so much for joining us, and join us next time on Album of the Week.
Well, obviously, Wayne, we have nothing to talk about, man. So
I know we better end it now, I think.
we should better just end this conversation now.
Okay, so welcome to the guest artist interview, and this week we're very privileged to have, in my view, the best vibes player in the world, Mr. Joe Locke. So thank you for taking the time to join us, Joe, and welcome to the show.
Oh, it's nice to be here, Wayne, via Skype.
Yeah.
It's great that we can do this from, I'm in New York, sitting at my office desk, and you're in Brighton, right?
Yeah, live from New York. It doesn't get much more show business than that, really.
But this is really cool, man. It's a relaxing way to to talk over the airwaves.
Very cool. But yeah, thanks for giving your time up, and I have to say I'm absolutely loving Signing. I think it's one of the most artistic albums that I've heard in a long, long time.
Thanks very much, Wayne.
So many influences in there. Which we'll get to in a little while. But how did you first get into music?
Oh, man, wow. I think you'll see from interviewing me, Wayne, that I can tend to be long-winded. And you maybe just asked the question that's been, that for a specific reason has a lot of juice for me because of the death of Levon Helm of the band. Are you familiar with Levon?
Yeah.
Well, Levon just passed away, and I actually was posting something on Facebook about his passing, sort of honoring and celebrating, his life in music.
Yeah.
And I realized as I was posting, I put a song up from YouTube there's an eponymously titled recording of theirs. That was by the band, the band.
Yeah.
The name of the group. And I posted a ballad called Whispering Pines, which I think is just one of my all-time favorite ballads. But when you ask me how I got into music, I realized when I was posting this acknowledgement of Levon on Facebook that album is what got me into music.
Wow.
And it actually was quite a moment of revelation for me that I just had a week ago. Because that's what put me in touch with, I was 10 years old, and I used to play that record over and over again in my room, all the songs, King Harvest, Up on Cripple Creek, Whispering Pines, Unfaithful Servant. And I had a Farfisa mini compact organ in my room, and I would try to learn those songs.
Yeah.
And I think that music, arriving in my ears at that age, it put me in touch with everything I love about music now, which is that music, that music made by those musicians wasn't perfect, but it was perfectly human.
Yeah.
And before my love of Wayne Shorter, before my love of Wayne Shorter, before my love of Jackie McLean, before my love of Bobby Hutcherson, what was my love of Robbie Robertson and Garth Hudson and Levon Helm and Richard Manuel and I think that part of me really feels deeply that the reason I love why I loved Jackie McLean, who was really my entrance to real acoustic jazz, why I loved Jackie McLean so much, and the reason I loved Bobby Hutcherson so much, and why I loved Wayne Shorter so much, was because the band and that album opened me up to the humanity of music.
Sure.
Not that it's something perfect, but it's something that the music reveals a humanity that isn't perfect, even in its imperfection, is what makes it more deep. And it may sound strange for a jazz musician to acknowledge an album that's coming out of rock and roll and Americana and rhythm and blues as the most important album, but that was really it for me. And then when I opened the door to jazz, I was already kind of knew what I was looking for in music, and it was that ability for music to communicate humanity.
Yeah, sure.
And that's exactly what brings us to Signing, and what Signing, the purpose of that album was to address those kind of issues of communication, direct communication. So how's that for a long answer?
No, that's great, and it's great. And actually, it because I recorded the previous part of this podcast like earlier today, and I was talking about signing, and basically, yeah, I kind of said that's what it sounds like. It sounds like, that all of the, I mean, Jeffrey as well. I know that he sort of comes from a very similar background to you in the sense that he loves all different types of music and is very much inspired by all different types. But it seems to me like that you got that at a very young age. You kind of understood that music has a strong connection to the human spirit, and it's all about kind of passing that around. And that's exactly what the signing is, what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, there's so many places we could go right now, because there's so much to talk about on the subject of the purpose of music being to communicate. It's interesting. As I look at this album and look at the fact that it's newly released, people could look at it and get very different people could get very different messages from this recording. There's no straight ahead jazz on this record, and yet it's very much a jazz record because we're very, very much in the moment on this record, and the improvisations that are happening are very, very, very in the moment, because we had never played any of this music before. Yeah, and all of the music, almost everything is a first take. Wow. And I think that the
it's the carpet.
It's the carpet man. The carpet man. I think that this music, there's no straight ahead jazz on this record. There's no swinging on this record in the traditional sense. And all of the grooves on the record, there's some stuff that's influenced by drum and bass. Yeah. Like the title track, Signing. And we didn't have, we really allowed things to happen in the studio on those 2 days. Yeah. And I think that there's a direct, our desire for to have the drum and bass sound be a contemporary was important, but not for commercial reasons. It was sort of what we were trying to say musically. And that I just imagined the title track, Signing, for the drums to be very present. And Terrion has a very, very distinct drum sound and an identity as a percussionist. Yeah. And I really wanted that to be front and center on this record, because like Keezer and because like Mike Pope, they all have very strong personalities. And I found that in mixing the record, as we brought the drums more up front and the bass more up front, this picture started to emerge of what the music was supposed to be that I didn't even realize when I was imagining it. Okay, so, and the fact that, it's really funny, it's easy. Some people may hear it and say, oh, there were commercial considerations in why there are these contemporary grooves and why it's coming from that place. But I am not good at pandering, and I am not good at having a commercial kind of agenda. I think I would have been much more successful years ago if I did. Yeah, so, sure. All I've ever been good at is making music that I myself would like to hear. Yeah. And it was really cool to see, as it is, I'm sure, with any project you've done, Wayne, is you have a vision of what you imagine the music to be, and then when the musicians with whom you're playing start to put themselves into it, it becomes something else. Yeah. And in this case, really something greater than I had imagined.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think there's another aspect too, as far as communicating. We're talking about signing, about the our desire to make direct contact with our fellow beings. I think part of the reason too that it was important to have a contemporary rhythmic underpinning was because I think if you want to speak to folks, it's important to speak in a contemporary vernacular.
Yeah.
And that's what we were trying to do too, So.
Absolutely. Well, the thing that I really love about this album is that it took me about 15. I think I've listened to it about 15, 16 times.
Man, that really means a lot to me, man. Thank you.
Well, I was just thinking to myself, this music doesn't sound complicated. And then after about the 15th time, because normally, obviously, as a musician, the analytical mind turns on and you think, oh, I wonder what they're doing here and I wonder what's going on here. But actually, that didn't happen for a long time, like 15 times after I heard it. And then suddenly I went, oh, I wonder what that riff is. And I went to the piano and tried to figure it out. And I realized, it's in some ridiculous time signature. And that was a realization that the music transcends all of the clever complexities that actually, that makes it up. It's a direct link to whatever the communication is that is coming across. Obviously it's different for each person, but yeah, I think that was the one thing that really impressed me was that I didn't realize it was complex until I actually sat down and tried to work it out.
Well, Wayne, all I can say to that is thank you, and that's something that really means a lot to me because that's what we were trying to do. Like I think it's one thing for musicians to make music for other musicians to appreciate.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do that. It was nice to hear. Actually, Terrion said the same thing that you said in describing the music. He said, there's some stuff that's really him. He said, I'm the drummer, so I know how involved it is because I had to play it. Yeah. It's very complicated. There's some crazy time things happening, but they don't sound hard.
Yeah.
Things. There's a tune that's in 13, but I really don't think it sounds like it's in 13.
Yeah.
It sounds like it almost has a natural backbeat.
Totally. Yeah.
There's a piece called Her Sanctuary.
Yeah.
It almost has this natural backbeat, and the melody, I think, as Terrion said too, is very singable. Like you walk away singing the melody, and yet the underpinning is in an odd time signature, and there's a lot of stuff happening on the B section that's quite harmonically, complicated, and it's in 13 at the same time, and yet I hope that the listener doesn't start to scratch their head and go, wow, this sounds really hard. That's the last thing.
Not at all. Yeah. No, it doesn't happen at all. I want to ask you about the Imogen Heap tune, Hide and Seek. I mean, when I first heard that, I was just blown away, like the original. But when and the sentiment behind that song, the lyrics. I think when I first heard that song, I thought, wow, the lyrics are really, really important to this song. And then you guys have done it, and it's instrumental, and yet somehow you still manage to maintain. Like, I don't know what the exact meaning of that song is, but it's quite a sad song from my take on it, and but just insanely beautiful, and you guys managed to keep all of that without having the lyrics there. That's
I have to be honest with you, Wayne. I have to be honest because I'm somebody who I've come from a literary background. My parents were both writers, and there's a love of literature in my family, and as a result, I really put great attention to lyrics.
Yeah.
And I enjoy writing lyrics too, and I'm a fan of poetry, and as is obvious from this record of some other tunes. But Hide and Seek, the lyrics of Hide and Seek weren't what grabbed me. As often is the case, why I choose a piece to do is because of the lyrics.
Yeah.
But this is one of the rare cases while the lyrics to Hide and Seek, and anybody who's listening to this podcast could illuminate me, but they're quite what's the word? They're quite obscure.
Yeah.
You know, crop circles in the carpet. Speaking of carpeting,
Yeah.
that when I heard the song and listening to it, they're obscure, and it wasn't the lyrics. There was a mood that I'm grabbed by, but not as in other pieces. A particular, like with the writing of Neil Young or the writing of or of some other writers like Jonathan Brooke or Bruce Cockburn or Tom Waits, or someone that an actual line will hit me between the eyes.
Yeah.
And on Imogene's piece, it wasn't so much that one particular verse or grabbed me, but it was the overall mood of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And we did it as a transcription, just completely as a transcription that Jeffrey did of the piece. Sometimes adding nothing is beautiful. If you have a piece of music, just to honor it in its entirety.
Yeah.
I did a piece in the mid '90s. I did a record called Slander and Other Love Songs on the Milestone label, and on that recording we did Blue by Joni Mitchell, which is one of my favorite Joni tunes. And Billy Childs was the pianist on that recording, and we did it again. I think there's only 2 bars that aren't literally a transcription of Joni's piece, and like Billy's playing her piano part, and I'm singing Joni's line, and it's just there's a purity to that. Of course, the other way to do it, Mark Copeland actually did a recording of Blue with Michael Brecker and I forget who else, Bill Stewart and some other people on this record, I think, and he does Blue, and he completely he does the exact opposite, the polar opposite of that, where he really masks it, and you almost don't hear it as the original tune. It's so disguised, and it's killing. But there are so many ways you could approach it, and sometimes I just love to do a piece almost exactly as the original, and just sort of dig, kind of like just throw yourself into the the song that you love, and do an honor the original version of it, which we did with Hide and Seek.
Yeah. Well, I guess if it's not broke, don't fix it, is the saying, isn't it?
Sometimes, because the instrumentation is so different, and because it's vibes and piano and bass and drums rather than the a cappella version that was the original. Even if you do a transcription and just kind of play the transcription, it sounds very, very different. But it's a lovely piece and very diatonic, man, but very sometimes simple is so good,
Yeah, absolutely. How did you get to the vibraphone?
Wow. That's well, the quick answer is that I played drums and piano. I played piano from the time I was a boy, and I played drums from the time I was a boy. And the vibraphone is right in the middle of the 2 instruments. The other answer, which is actually equally true, is my mother always wanted me to play the glockenspiel in the marching band.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Now, that's a sadistic thing to want to. I always say that the glockenspiel player in the marching band, if you're in a school band, you play the glockenspiel, the nerds beat you up after class. And this is what my mother wanted for her son. It's just terrible, But she came into my bedroom when I was 12 years old, and she said, "Joe, there's an ad in the paper for something called a vibraphone. That's something like a glockenspiel, isn't it? Let's go have a look at it." And we went and had a look at it, and it's cost something ridiculous, like $200. And a vibraphone now costs $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000.
Yeah.
And this was a couple $100, and we bought it and brought it home, and eventually I started plonking on it, and I never stopped.
Wow.
If there had been an ad that day in the newspaper for a glockenspiel,
You would have got one of those. I mean, do you
I'd be a jazz glockenspiel.
do you ever stray? Do you ever play the marimba or the Glock, or do you ever?
Yeah, sure, man.
Mm,
I've recorded. The majority of my playing is always on vibes, but
yeah.
I've done albums, Four Walls of Freedom, and some work I did with Eddie Henderson, a few albums where I play marimba,
Mm,
and sometimes soloing on marimba,
yeah.
and I enjoy it. I love the sound, but the majority of my work is on vibes. But marimba is such a beautiful instrument.
Sure. So had you discovered jazz before you got the set of vibes, or after?
Yeah, I think the vibes in jazz happened at the same time. The reason I got into jazz, into wanting to learn to improvise was because of the vibraphone.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay.
I was playing in a rock band from the time I was probably like 11 to 14. It was a rock band called Tullamore Dew. All guys much older than me. They were 15, even 16. Old men. And I was playing drums, and I remember, and it was a band that was really influenced by Black Sabbath and
Yeah.
Zeppelin and bands like that.
Mm.
Bands like Uriah Heep and those rock bands. And I remember I was getting into the vibraphone, and I brought the vibes to a Tullamore Dew rehearsal, and I kept asking the guys I said, I want to play vibes on this instead of drums. And they said, okay, cool. There are amps, like big amps all over the place. I said, could you turn down a little bit? Yeah, sure, Joe. And we tried it, and then I said, could you turn down a little more? Okay, Joe, sure, okay. Oh, could you turn down a little bit more? And they said, Joe, our amps are off. So I think that's when I really started to get more and more into jazz and to more and more into the vibraphone.
Yeah.
The vibes just gradually took over from the drums until I got to the point where I couldn't play the drums at all, and still can't.
Mm. Okay. So how did you discover jazz? How did you start to then find your way? I mean, did you study with a teacher? Did you get shown anything, or did you just kind of work it out for yourself?
No, and there was a great music school. I grew up in Rochester, New York, and there was there were two separate and both incredible communities in Rochester. One was the Eastman School of Music, where great people were coming in and out of all the time.
Yeah.
And you had like Rayburn Wright, the great composer and arranger. People like Bill Dobbins are on faculty there, and I wasn't, I was taking drum lessons at the Eastman, but then there was also a great local grassroots scene. Okay. There was a drummer named Vinny Ruggiero, who was a drummer who not many people know, but those who do know how great he was. He was a drummer from New York who had moved to Rochester in 1968 to work with Chuck Mangione's group, as did Steve Davis, the bass player from the Train group, also lived in Rochester, had moved up there to work with Chuck also. So we had Vinny Ruggiero, who had subs for Elvin and Train's quartet at the Vanguard on one occasion, and played with Bud Powell's trio when he was a teenager.
Wow. And
played with Slide Hampton's octet and George Coleman and all these people. He was living in Rochester. Steve Davis was living in Rochester. Sal Nistico used to come through. Joe Romano, who's a world-class saxophonist, lived there. And there were just some great players who really turned me on to the real stuff.
Yeah.
And my first real teacher, was a fabulous pianist who's still on the scene here. His name is Phil Markowitz.
Oh yeah.
He was in Dave Liebman's band for years, made some beautiful recordings with Dave Liebman and Bob Mintzer, and he's the pianist in the Three Tenors, Mike Brecker, Lovano.
Yeah.
Mike Brecker, Lovano, and Dave Liebman. Yeah. With Cecil McBee and Billy Hart. And Phil was my first teacher, and I was 13 and he must have been 19 or 20. And I studied with him, and he sort of gave me my first leg up, if you will. teaching me what improvisation was.
Yeah.
And then a week out of high school, I got a call from a saxophone player named Spider Martin, who was a saxophone player who worked a lot. He worked a lot on the East Coast, and we used to work what's called the Chitlin circuit. We used to play clubs like Groove Homes, a lot of organ clubs. Jack McDuff, Jimmy McGriff,
Yeah.
Groove Homes, people like that.
Okay.
And I would work with him with that group when I was like 17, 18, and I got a lot of experience playing and learning tunes and learning what it was to be, kind of thrown into the grown-up world of being a professional jazz musician right out of high school.
Wow. Wow.
It was fun.
Yeah. Scary, I imagine, at times.
Scary and fun, man. Scary and fun. I was living. I remember before that, even when I was still in high school, I used to play at a club called Jenks and Jones Lounge that was in Rochester, and I from the time I was like 16, so 16 and 17, those 2 years, or maybe 16, 17, I was going to school during the week, and Friday and Saturday nights I was living this adult life, playing with musicians that were 20, 30 years older than me.
Yeah.
At Jenks and Jones, and playing, kind of living this schizophrenic existence of being a kid during the week and a jazz musician on the weekends.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would recommend it, but it was the way I started the life.
Yeah.
I got lots of good stories, Wayne.
No, they're great. Keep them coming. Could you talk about some of your favorite jazz composers, past and present?
Oh my goodness, man! I have several. Ed Simon, the pianist, is one of my favorite writers. Seamus Blake is one of my favorite writers, and the reason Seamus is one of my favorite writers has to do with signing, with communicating with. There's something about Seamus's writing that as sophisticated and really, really unique and original and quote unquote jazz influenced his writing is. Almost everything he writes has some kind of a hook that you carry away in your body, or singing the melody or something, or there's a rhythmic thing happening that just feels so good. And Seamus, almost as much or more than anyone I can think of, has this ability as a songwriter. I consider like his pieces to be song, like almost all of them are songs.
Yeah.
And I think that we all call ourselves composers, but I think there are many of us who are. I'm more of a songwriter than I am a composer. I think Tim Garland is a composer.
Yeah.
I'm a songwriter. But when I look at someone like Seamus, he elevates the craft of songwriting to I'll just say to a high place.
Yeah.
And I love his writing. And what I think the litmus test for me is that when I'll put on one of Seamus's records and the next day I want to hear it again.
Yeah.
And that's so for that reason he's one of my favorite composers.
Sure. So he played in Christian McBride's band, didn't he, for a while?
No.
Did he not?
Actually, that was Ron Blake.
Ron Blake, yes.
That was Ron Blake.
Yeah.
He may have done some stuff with Christian, but I don't think so.
Okay.
But Seamus is just a great, composer, songwriter. People doing things now. Actually, Guillermo Klein is a great, creative, a composer on the scene. I'm a fan of Miguel Zenon's writing, especially Esta Plena.
Yeah.
One of his new, not his last recording, but one of his recent recordings that just does that just really acknowledges the roots of Borinquen music and also pushes the boundaries into the future. in the way that Astor Piazzolla did with tango. You know.
Yeah.
You know, there are so many that I dig, man. You know, I'm a fan of Potter's writing, of Chris Potter's writing.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a big fan of Victor Lewis's writing. Wow. I'm probably missing so many, you know, people who are that are writing incredible music. You know?
Yeah.
I was just turned on to actually today to a contemporary classical, if you will, composer. He's Greek but lives in New Zealand, and I'm forgetting his name right now. But I just heard a piece for marimba percussion and prepared tape. That was one of the best marimba pieces I've ever heard.
Wow.
And you know, so that was a pleasure to hear. You know.
So you say you're a songwriter. So how do you go about creating your songs? Do you write at the piano, or do you write from within your head or on the vibes? How does it work?
I usually always write at the piano.
Yeah.
But it's really funny, man. A lot of times, not sure, Wayne. A lot of times, a phrase will kind of tweak inspiration for me. And I think, as I said, I think words a lot of times are the beginning of a musical idea. You know, I think that has to do with the literary background that I come from.
Yeah.
Sometimes hearing a phrase will I'll say that phrase that I just heard is a song title, and then the song title will be the beginning of a melody emerging.
Right. Okay.
There's a tune that I wrote that's on my Force of Four album. That's called "Available in Blue."
Yeah.
And that song, it's one of my simplest pieces and one of my favorite pieces. And it's a diatonic, you know, ballad, you know, rubato pulse ballad, but the title came from, I was in a clothing store, and there was a woman in front of me in line at the clothing store, and she was holding a sweater in her hand, and she said to the cashier, "Is this available in blue?" For some reason, people always laugh when I announce that in public, and it disturbs me because I don't know what's funny about it. Maybe people get nervous when I tell that story, but it actually is poignant to me because when I heard her say, "Is this available in blue?" Somehow a novella of this woman's life kind of like I wrote in my mind.
Yeah.
I kind of thought of it as a available in blue, that she was saying, she was telling her life story, and that she was available in blue. I'm available, but I'm blue. You know?
Yeah.
I don't know, and somehow, and it became available in blue. I'm available in blue. There was something very poignant about when she said that, and she did her transaction and went on her way, but I carried that thought with me all day. Went home and got to the piano. And it's very funny when I tell that story. This is very personal, actually, but when I tell that story in public, audiences laugh. And I've told myself I'm never going to tell that story or what the genesis of that title is anymore, because it actually upsets me that people laugh, and I don't know why they do.
Yeah.
Because it's actually not funny at all. It's what I got from it. You know, but that's an idea. That song was born of a woman in front of me in line in the clothing store saying, "Is this available in blue?" And this song emerged. Sword of Whispers is one of my songs.
That's beautiful.
Thanks, man. That was inspired by and also dedicated to Jimmy Scott, the great singer.
Yeah.
A critic in the New York Times wrote after one of Jimmy's concerts, he said, the journalist wrote, the music of Jimmy Scott cuts to the truth like a sword, but it is a sword of whispers. And when I read that review in the New York Times, I went, wow.
Yeah.
What a perfect way to describe the music of Jimmy Scott, and what a poetic way to describe it. That here's this person who has a strength of character that's like steel, but whose music, when he sings, he lays himself bare and is completely vulnerable in the act of singing a ballad.
Yeah.
A sword of whispers is such an incredible way to describe that. And as soon as I read it, I said, "That's a song."
Yeah, yeah.
So a lot of times the inspiration for songs come from a phrase.
That's fantastic. Just while we're on the subject of ballads, we at the school I just did a sort of session on the art of playing ballad. Hints and tips on how to play a ballad. And one of the things that I do on gigs certainly is the ballad is like it's like the holy grail. It's like, for me, and I was trying to explain this to the students, it's the time where you can completely control the room and get the audience eating out your hand. Can you give me some tips, or not necessarily tips, but your thoughts on playing ballads? Because you read, all the jazz greats. Miles Davis says, the reason I don't play ballads is because I love them so much. And
that's such a great quote.
Exactly, and I can totally get that. And you strike me as you're very, going back to this communication thing, you're all about the communicating with your audience, whether you're playing a ballad, whether you're playing, I don't know, Cherokee at 300 beats, it's all coming through you. How do you set yourself up to play a ballad?
Well, you know what, man? I think one thing, it's so funny. It's so great to talk to you, man, because I didn't know any of these questions were coming, and it's so great to answer these questions in the moment.
Yeah.
Because on any given day, I may have a slightly different answer.
Yeah, yeah.
But when you said that and we can only speak from our experience, but the first thing that comes to mind is it's important for me these days to play ballads that are really resonating with me at the moment, that mean something to me.
Yeah.
At the moment.
Yeah.
Just to play any ballad and make it really work. If I was a better musician, yeah, of course I could probably make it happen any at will, any time on any ballad. But I know I can't. But I have a better chance of really making a statement and really making something artful if it's a ballad, if it's a song that really is resonating with me. And one of the songs that's really resonating with me right now is a Bobby Troup tune called "The Meaning of the Blues."
Oh yeah.
And I've been really lucky lately too to be able to play with with real kindred spirits, man, or people who are just so great to play with. And there's something about, lately I've been playing that tune, and I really feel while I'm playing like there's a charge of emotion going right up my spine to my brain.
Yeah.
And that's when you really feel like you're plugged into the emotion of what you're playing. And Wayne, I really believe that there's no such thing as a stupid audience. I really think that if a musician, if a player is really connecting with himself and the music in the moment, that even people who don't know a thing about jazz or a thing about what's going on stage is going to feel that.
Absolutely.
And I would like to feel when the audience isn't responding and we're not getting you're not getting feedback, and that it's their fault. But you know what? Most of the time it's my fault.
Yeah.
And most of the time when I'm connecting with an audience, it's when I'm really connecting with myself. And I just, so in playing a song like Meaning of the Blues, it's like, why do I love that tune? It's an absolutely, now this is an example of where the lyrics are profoundly moving to me. About somebody, about someone for whom the word blue was just a color. It was the color of the sky. It was a ribbon for first prize. But now that same word is infused with infused with sorrow, regret, loss. And that's what that song is about. And how can you play that song or read those lyrics or hear it sung by someone like Julie London or Shirley Horn and not be brought to your knees with the human experience that we all share? And I just played that tune recently. I had the great pleasure of doing a concert with Dane Richardson, who's the head of percussion at Lawrence University, Mark Ernest, who's the bass faculty head, and the incredible pianist Bill Carruthers. Are you familiar with?
Yeah.
Bill, and we did Meaning of the Blues. We actually started the concert with Meaning of the Blues, and we had never played together. We didn't rehearse, and we had never played that tune. And it started as a pre-improvisation and just kind of went into Meaning of the Blues. And we talked about that tune afterwards. And there's a chord in that tune that almost everything is moving toward. It's all moving toward that chord. And in the key of D minor, it's the end of it's going into like the top of the second ending, and it's in the key of D minor, it's like an F sus chord going to a D flat, and everything is moving toward that chord. And when you hit that chord, it's like everything has been moving toward that, and that's the moment where just the overflow happens, where the what's the word, it's the emotional climax of the piece.
Sure.
And it's just absolutely beautiful. And it just affects me every time I play it. And Bill and I talked about that chord, and he said, that's the chord in that song, isn't it? I went, exactly, man, that's the chord too. So I don't know, man. I think playing ballads, and I don't think it's about playing a lot of notes or a few notes. It's about playing. It's about being connected emotionally to what you're playing. I heard Bobby Hutcherson play "I Loves You, Porgy," man, and sometimes he's playing a few notes, and sometimes he's playing these amazing kind of cascading sheets of sound. But they're all going toward an emotional punchline or emotional moment of, I can't think of the word, Wayne. I'm sorry.
I know what you mean.
That point, that emotional apex.
Yeah.
And there are some I think of Wayne Shorter. I think of Wayne's original recording of Infant Eyes or something like that. That's just an absolutely, such a great ballad performance that Gene Carn wrote lyrics to it. His solo is such a song in itself, long form song that Gene Carn wrote beautiful lyrics to the entire solo. Does that answer your question, or am I totally meandering?
It does. No, absolutely. It really does. And I think it's kind of a much more eloquent way of what I was trying to tell the students. So I think hearing that from you is going to be, really good, because I was basically trying to say the same thing by saying, you've got to reach the meaning of that song for you in that moment. You know, and like it might be different the next day, but you've got to somehow get to the meaning of that song for you in that particular moment in time.
Man, I have to say that I have a problem with, and there are people who, there are people who would consider this blasphemy, but it's one of the reasons that but if I can't speak honestly at this point in my life, what's the point? If I have trouble with some of the music of Cole Porter, because the lyrics to me are so high society, champagne, and I guess that there are some ballads of Cole Porter's that I don't resonate. I don't vibe with them, man. I just don't vibe with them. I don't really. There's nothing about the lyrics to "I Can't Get Started" that really touch me. On the golf course, I'm under par, and Metro Goldwyn wants me to star. I got a house that's a show place, but can't get no place with you. That really doesn't speak to me.
I can understand that.
but that's me, and that's the thing about music that's so great, is that it's everyone gets something different out of something, man. I don't what doesn't resonate with me profoundly resonates with someone else, man. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, there are some people, like, you know, I'm very happy that you dig signing, but I know that there are some people who are going to listen to it and go, I don't get it. I don't get it. This isn't my cup of tea. And that's, man, you know, they say my father was a Latin professor, and you know, he taught me the phrase, man, what is it? De gustibus non disputandum est. In manners of taste, there is no argument.
So it's coming to that time in the show where I start to wrap things up and say my goodbyes. What a fantastic show it's been, and I'd just like to say a huge thank you to Joe Locke for doing that great interview and for letting us use the music on his new album, The Signing, which I know you've all got by now. And by the way, I'd just like to correct, I said it was about the price of 2 beers, but actually it's even cheaper than that. I've just been onto Joe's website, and he's got the MP3 version, which is $6.99, and that's dollars. So no excuses. If I were you, I would go for the slightly higher quality 320-bit MP3, which is a massive $9.99, and again dollars. So no excuses. This is great music at an extremely low price. You know, the time and the effort and the money that's gone into creating this CD. Please show your appreciation. A big thank you to Mike Guest, who puts the podcast together. It really wouldn't sound great if I was doing it, and Mike really knows what he's doing. He's an absolute master of sound, and not just sound, but that's another story. We're going to get Mike on actually and do a podcast with him, because he's a fascinating guy, and he had a trip of a lifetime a few months back on the Jazz Cruise, so we're going to get him on to talk about that. So thanks, Mike. So I'm going to leave you with an absolutely stonking song from the album Signing, Joe Locke, Jeffrey Keyser Group. And it's been a pleasure to bring this show to you. So keep writing in, stay in touch, and let me know if there's anything that you want me to add to the podcast, or any questions for any up-and-coming artists, or even suggestions for artists that you want me to interview, both local and further afield. So so visit www.brightonjazzschool.com/podcast, and as I say every week, there is a very shiny PayPal donation button on there, and this podcast will always be free, but the more we record, the more expensive it gets. So I really would appreciate a little bit of financial support if you're enjoying them and you feel passionate about these and you want them to keep going. I'll do my best to keep them going, but like I said, the more we record, the more expensive the hosting becomes, because we use more and more space. But anyway, so yeah, any donations would be much appreciated. But that's about it for now. So I'm going to leave you in the very capable hands of the Joe Locke and the Jeffrey Keyser Group. And this is a fantastic track. You're going to love this. It's called Darth Alexis. And enjoy this one. And we'll see you next week. Do not miss part 2 of the Joe Locke interview. So tune back in next week. And for now, this is your host, Wayne McConnell, signing off.